weeks.
Is that right?
Is that right? Oh. And it still looks like a pig pen.
Well, I don't consider books a mess, particularly.
Looks a hell of a lot better than it used to. At least you can move around. Looks like Edward's house used to. Remember, you used to had to walk around piles of books.
It's almost like he treated his. He seemed to treat his house almost like a gallery, you know, because things would change. You'd be in there one day, and everything would be set up. You could tell it was set up very deliberately, and the next day there'd be like a new display.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. He was. I think it's so great that you're doing this. I can't tell you. I can't wait for it. When do you think it'll be ready?
Well, I'm hoping next spring, but I think by the time I'm done with production, I'll have to work out, you know, stuff with entertainment lawyers, you know, just like the copyright stuff.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it'll be a pain in the ass.
I'm not sure, you know, if it was as an independent project, it'll probably take a while to clear that stuff up. But my formal deadline, my formal goal is like April 2002. But,
I hope I live that long because I really want to see it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the whole idea of this is that, you know, it's got to be something that Edward would appreciate himself. I mean, it won't be anything that, you know, who can ever really tell, right? Who can ever really, I mean, not necessarily appreciate, but will be accurate.
Well, that's it. That's it. Because if and when they get this museum going, that'll be an ideal thing.
Yeah.
And as I say, they bought the place, and it's up to the people that I've talked to in the surrounding area are all for it, except for the guy that lives behind him, who's been using a third of his land as a lawn.
Yeah.
And of course, when these people took over, they put the lines there, so the guy's lost a half of his lawn.
Yeah.
But what the hell?
So why don't we start back at the beginning? Maybe you could just tell me a little bit about how when you first met Edward and how that happened. I mean,
Christ, that must have been maybe 18 or 20 years ago. And my friend Maura and I used to go to the Highfield Theater. They had the Clock Light Opera Company, and I love light opera. And Edward used to be there all the time in his little shorts. And so we didn't know him, but I would go up to him and I'd say, "Hi." And he'd say, "Yes." And he'd turn and walk away. Well, it got to be a game. And so for 2 years, we went there each season, I think 8 shows, 10 shows. And we'd walk up to him and we'd say, "Hi," and he'd say, "Yes," and gone. So finally, I went to, what the hell, what was that artist's name, or author's name? His daughter drew an angel on the bridge, a railroad bridge, Vonnegut. So I was invited to a party over at Vonnegut's, and Edward was there. And I'm not much of a social person. I don't have anything to say to anybody. And so I sat down on a thing in the garden, and Edward sat next to me. And we talked maybe 10 minutes, just glittering generalities. And that was the beginning of our association. And we then after that, he moved from Barnstable over here to this little house on the Common that I wanted. I think it was $80,000, but I didn't have the money. I couldn't. But Edward bought it, and it had no plumbing. The electricity was outmoded. It was just a disaster. And so he fixed it up, and he hired a guy to do the inside. But then he should have done the roof first, because when the inclement weather came, it rained like hell and ruined everything the guy did inside. But that was Edward, you know, he listened to a different drummer. So then I can't remember, we started to go to auctions, and we started to go to dinner, and he and Maura, and then we went to shows at the Playhouse, and he knew Helen and Herbert, and he knew some of the Shirley Booth and that actress from Chatham, a Julie,
Harris.
what? Julie
Julie Harris.
Harris, right. Thank you. And
I used to do landscaping for Shirley Booth
yeah,
back in the
What the hell?
late 80s.
yeah.
That was great. She was really
I
nice.
was at the Playhouse one time after the show, and I had a couple of glasses of wine.
Could you just? I missed that last part.
Where?
Who were the people that you were? Could you start? the
Oh,
story over?
Helen and Herbert from the Playhouse, the
Yeah.
set designers. They were there for 40 years, 40 odd years, and they're absolutely brilliant people. And Edward loved them, and so anyway, Shirley Booth. I went up to her and I told her how much I enjoyed her performance in such and such a play, and she turned coldly and said, "I've never done that property." Oh. Never approached another star after that. Forget about it. And so anyway, Edward and I used to go to plays, and we go to. He liked the most absurd movies, so I wouldn't go half the time because his taste was different. And as a matter of fact, Rick Jones was saying that he had Buffy the Vampire Girl. He had all of the tapes. He loved Buffy the Vampire. He loved some kind of X-Files or something like that. And he had a very common denominator taste when it came to and Mora, my friend Mora, that we used to go to dinner with and to auctions with. She knew all sorts of people and names in the theater and in movies and television. And Edward was very deep into all of that. So they got along well. But Edward and I, in the I guess, 15 years that we were actually talking friends, never had one serious discussion, not one. Because he was on such an intellectual level that I couldn't reach it, and I really wasn't interested in it. So what we did was we did fantasy all the time, and we did little plays, little vignettes back and forth, so that I never. Our friendship was totally different than I didn't intrude in his life and he didn't intrude in mine. And it was a perfect relationship because we didn't owe anybody anything. And so we used to go to his house to dinner, Herbert and Helen and I. And we were in the kitchen one time, he was cooking, and he flambéed his beard. We killed ourselves laughing. That was the last time we went to dinner at Edward's. And that was about 10 years ago, similar, something like that.
I mean, the last time
we got invited to dinner, Herbert, Helen, or myself. Had nothing to do with the flambeing of the beard, of course, but he was an absolute joy, and he was just so well versed in everything that means anything culturally. For centuries past, he was familiar with them. And he did all kinds of he was an absolute joy when it came to people that came to him looking for a poster or a little sketch of some sort or innumerable requests that he had, and he accepted each one of them, and he did them all very graciously and usually on time. Once in a while he was a little behind, but he was such a giver. He gave and gave and gave, and he did it unobtrusively so that people didn't really know that he did it. And a lot of times people did something for the Hysterical Society. I've forgotten what it was. But he didn't get any thanks for it. They just accepted it as a matter of course, and you know, which was okay with Edward.
I noticed the pet sitting services flyer down on your board.
Oh, yes,
That's
that
down
Barbara
there, too.
Breidenbeck, she was another friend of Edward's. And she's another one that's a TV nut. So she and Edward were like that because she did the X-Files and she did all of those idiotic shows that, like, television is a morass. It's the most garbage thing that you could possibly watch. But Edward was delighted. He would tape shows and redo them, you know. It was just unbelievable, the taste that man had. And I don't think I ever had one show that he liked that I watched. And I mean, Buffy the Vampire, I mean, my God, once would be perfect. But a whole series, what the hell what can a vampire do with, you know, a girl vampire eater or whatever the heck it was? Anyway, but Barbara Breidenbeck thrived on that sort of thing. And as a matter of fact, she went to his original production of Dracula in New York, and she has the program, and she has a whatever the advertising stuff was from that, and so she and he used to, she'd join us sometimes for dinner, and sometimes for the show, but she's a busy person, and so that Edward's life, I can't tell you how proud I was to have him for a friend, how astonished I was to have him, because we had practically nothing in common. We enjoyed food, and we liked auctions. We enjoyed the theater. Oh, I know, we're both collectors, and we're both bibliophiles. But Edward in his home had 40,000 books when just recently. And he read every single one of them because, as I told you before, when he finished reading a book, he made a notation, the back cover or the front cover. The only ones he didn't were reference books. He didn't mark those, and I got quite a few of those because it gives you an insight to his writing on the terminology that you've never heard of, that he was quite familiar with, and he was just a brilliant, brilliant person. What a shame that he had to go so early. And I told you before, I got dozens and dozens of things that I should have had him autograph, but I thought, that's presumptive. You know, if I do that, then I'm his friend because I want his autograph. And then I found out on eBay they were getting $5 for his autograph, so that made it even worse. And so I told him one day that I had some stuff I wanted him to sign, but I wanted to pay him because I thought that I didn't think he was earning as much money as he was. We had a conversation one time, Herbert and Helen and myself, and they were talking about income, and he mentioned his income, and it was terribly small, minuscule. And I said, the man is respected in writing all over the world. He has an international, small, but an international clientele, a clique. And where the hell is all the money going? I can't believe that he's only earning that much, and I felt very badly. Well, it turns out after he died that he was quite wealthy, and that the amount that he said he got a year was a total figment of his imagination. But he was funny, and he kept every single record. He only left this country once. He went to Scotland, and when Rick was cleaning out the house, excuse me, he found a little package that had his passport, his airplane ticket, his inoculation certificate, the hotel that he stayed at, the receipts for everything that he was a saver, and that he gave his friends books that he'd written that had been published, and he signed them, and one would think from looking at his house, inside and out, that he didn't save anything, that, you know, he was eclectic and kind of indifferent. Well, he saved everything. And that when he gave you a book, and he said to you from Edward, and he put no number, an OS, but when he went home, he had all of that listed, so that when Brown,
Andreas, Andy,
what's his first name?
Andy.
Andreas. That's why I couldn't think of it. I never call him Andy. I think it's presumptive. I call him Andreas. Anyway, so when he went through Edward's things, and it took him weeks and weeks to go through all of the things, and he would find a folder, and in that folder would be the books that Edward had written and who he gave free copies to his a small group of friends that he had. That, and I think some of the stuff I've never seen it published. Remember that little bitty book, like the, and I've never seen that published anywhere. So it was the Phantoid Press. I thought it was Phantoid, but thank you for correcting me.
He did it consciously.
That's what?
When he gave you something, he was doing it consciously. It wasn't a
Yeah.
throwaway.
Oh, sure.
Because he went home, he remembered it, he wrote it down.
Yeah. Or he wrote it down before he gave it, one or the other. So that we have a great many things that otherwise we couldn't find, because his books aren't that prolific, or so not that popular. They're very prolific, but you don't find them like if you would in New York at the Gotham bookstore, or any other bookstore. But down here, they had maybe 4 or 5, and so that it. But he sold all over the world, and he was an absolute joy, and he loved it. He loved some places he wouldn't go to eat, so it was difficult to take him out because he was such a pain in the butt.
What sort of places didn't he like to go to?
I don't want to mention any names, but he loved Japanese. Loved Japanese. Of course, he studied Japanese in college, and I didn't know that. And he got, I think, when he was at the tail end of his Army career, they sent him to do something with Japanese, the Japanese language. So he wrote it and he read it, and but he was a strange person. He had a serious illness. Didn't tell anybody about it. And he went to the hospital, and he came out, and we didn't know, because sometimes he'd be gone for days and end, you'd never see him. So one day, he used to have a lot of interviews here at the restaurant. In fact, he had one booth that he used for interviews. For his breakfast, he came here every day for 8 years, twice a day. At breakfast, he'd sit at the counter on the far end by the door. For lunch, he'd sit in the dining room in the seat on that long bench on the right-hand side. And if he was conducting an interview, or if he had friends, he'd sit in the third booth on the right. And so the New York Times, he was always getting interviewed by obscure publications, famous publications, foreign publications. So the New York Times did an article, and in the article, he divulged everything in his life, and he told about this sickness that we never knew and what it was, and I can't, if it was prostrate or something, I can't remember what the hell it was, but we didn't know it, had no idea until we read the article. He's never said a word about it, but he opened up, when you were doing interviews, he told you everything. He was, right there. And he had such a fascinating life. And his mother and father got divorced, and then 21 years later or so, they got married again. It was, whew, unbelievable. But he was an absolute joy to be with. And as I say, we saved all of his slips. Rick Jones has 100 and something of them, and I have some. And it shows that he had almost the same thing every time in the morning. And he'd get his own food. Except for the English muffin, we had to cook that. But he'd go over and he'd get his Wheaties. He liked Wheaties, and he liked fruit. Well, he put a hell of a lot more fruit on his Wheaties than we would have put on. And then he would ring himself up at the cash register, and that was the worst thing we ever did. Some days he would ring up, his lunch bill would be $1,400 and some odd dollars. manipulating with the keys. And I think the highest was $14,000 something. But he would ring himself up, and no one knows to this day what he charged himself for his food. No idea. And then he'd leave, you know, a tip in the Gorey bowl.
Like a price list by the register that he could
Yeah,
look up?
right. God, what a joy. What an absolute joy. He was an enigma to a lot. But you know, when he first came in here, he'd come in with a book. He wouldn't look to the left, to the right. He would order his food, and he'd read his book, eat his food, close out the door. He's gone. He didn't pay for his own. We rang it up on the register. Then this is such a joyful place. The people that come in here all have a sense of humor, and they have an affinity for one another. And after a couple of years, it began to get to him, so that he wasn't as aloof as he was. He was a little more friendly. And then it got to the point where he was really friendly, didn't read his book anymore, intruded in private conversations, told people his opinion, and he was very opinionated, and he had the statistics to back up his thoughts. So that at the end, he was a tyrant. He was in, out, talking. Everybody knew him. He knew everybody, and everybody'd stop and talk to him on the way out. So what a change in between the first 2 years and the last 7th and 8th, or from the 5th to the 8th year. And it was a joy to behold, and it made you feel warm inside that, you know, you had the opportunity to be part of all of this shaping.
Well, it was obviously very important to him. I mean, one thing that you read in all the interviews is that, you know, they all kind of latch onto that thing. Well, if you want to find Edward Gorey, he's at Jack's Outback breakfast and lunch.
Yeah.